listening to the 14th source for all geeky and nerdy news and discussion, which means that you're listening to a podcast.
For all intents and purposes.
I am D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And we are your two overeducated, codependent nerd hosts, bringing you the things that we like to talk about, but filtered through inquisitive and critical lenses in the episode for Friday, December 30th, 2022.
You had to stop and think about that.
I did. Well, yes, it is correct. Hey, man, let me tell you, the last couple weeks have been nothing but a blur for me. Actually, as of this recording, this morning, the morning of the day we recorded the show, which of course is Friday, December 30th. We don't record it earlier. This is live. I tested negative, finally, for COVID-19. So I'm still feeling some effects, but at least I can, go outside.
That's good.
Yeah, I'm very happy about that. So yeah, I'm back and I'm better than ever, quote unquote. Well, luckily for me, I'm not to go too far into it. My symptoms were fairly mild. Hey, I want to make it clear, it was not fun. Right. And luckily, I've been actually feeling fine the last couple of days, but have been testing positive until, like I said, this morning. So, I think I'm crossing my fingers here. I'm knock on wood. I probably don't have much to fear in terms of long COVID, but who knows? The one thing I'm most interested about in that regard is just if I kind of get energy back, because that was the biggest symptom I have, was just getting tired real fast.
Well, and it's funny. Speaking of long COVID, I was talking to a friend this week. This last week, Seattle's had some wild weather. The last week or two, and I was responding really negatively. Like, I had a lot of symptoms that I actually determined were basically reacting to pressure changes, which, happens, but it's not something I ever really experienced. I had a friend who said, ever since she got COVID, she's been reacting to pressure changes differently. And it's one of those things where, like, any illness, any sickness, any disease always can have the effect.
You mean like barometric pressure changes, not like, stress?
Yeah. Barometric, not like under, no, I'm not under pressure.
Not like
Well, because, the barometric pressure in Seattle was all over the place. We had some weird weather. So it's one of those things I'm now thinking about. Like, I'm trying to keep track. Yes, I'm getting old, but also how am I reacting differently to just anything? Just to keep track, to think what am I noticing since I had COVID?
Pretty soon you're going to be like, oh, the old trick knee is acting up. That means rain is coming.
Right. Well, that's a thing. Trick knees, man. They're real.
And tricky.
Wait, they're tricks? Anyway.
This is the penultimate day of 2022. And we figured we would take the episode to reflect. Look back at the year that was. So we're going to spend today reflecting on 2022, the things that stood out to us, the good, the bad, the happy, the sad. I feel like I should start singing a song now. I'm not sure. Let's just go ahead and start with the negative stuff first, because 2022 was a year full of controversy in the nerd and geeky world, right? So, Andrew, why don't you go ahead and run down what some of those were, maybe what you feel was the most impactful one was, and maybe continues to be.
Which one? To a certain extent, we've got a rich sycophant buying a social media website and turning it into dog shit. On one hand, we've got, a rich sycophant merging his company with a popular media company and turning their streaming service into garbage. What I love about that one is you could probably have multiple guesses as to which one I'm talking about. Right. No, and then just this last couple weeks, there was a big kind of, now we haven't talked about it on the show, but a popular gaming company announced some changes to the way they're doing their games, such that they can basically extract more money from people. Right. And I think, like, which one is the most catastrophic or the most outrageous? Really, they're all just the same. They're like similar takes on, hell, a company cancels a movie after filming it, but before releasing it for a tax write-off, right?
Yep. Yeah.
By the way, that was, so I mentioned HBO twice there if you weren't keeping track. There's this idea that, like, I feel rich people doing shitty things because they're rich so they can make more money has always been part of the American narrative, right? I mean, really, I'd say the last 30 years, my life maybe, but then you think back to, wait, no, actually, we've been doing this longer than that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole age, a gilded age, if you will, about that. But it does really feel like this year has been a lot of cases of the nerdy and geeky stuff just being kind of kicked around because of, like, I don't know, shareholder interest or whatever, right? Some rich people making more money than they need.
That's the thing. I feel like, as you're right, this sort of rich greed, the greediness of the rich and powerful and corporate has always been a part of American culture, especially modern American culture. But I feel like this year it's
a
really
foundational principle, really.
right. At peak capitalism, it really sunk its teeth into nerdy stuff. I feel like there's sci-fi, fantasy, comic books, video games are escapism, but now those things are getting so big. Like this, what we're seeing is like the flip side of the coin of the things we've been championing for the last couple of years. Of like, hey, it's great that the stuff that we were made fun of, or the stuff that our parents didn't understand when we were kids, it's now mainstream, and like people people see how awesome this stuff is. But the side effect of that is that it's bringing a lot of money, which brings in a lot of rich assholes.
And in some cases makes new rich assholes.
Indeed. And so we're seeing the kind of business side of things, and it's not fun.
It's not. And it, like, so for example, right, Discovery HBO has been a really hot one this year because not only
technically Warner Brothers Discovery.
I'm sorry, Warner Brothers Discovery, which is of which HBO is part of the family that's being executed, and for example, right, they've got they had the Batgirl film, whether or not it was going to be good or not, like it was done, and all indications are it may have been actually a fun movie, and it was canceled not because of James Gunn or because of anyone else. It was canceled because. Gosh, they just found an opportunity to cancel it, for a business. It was a business decision. It's a change of business tax write-off type of thing.
The narrative is that this guy, the CEO's name is David
Darth Sidious.
Yep, yep. David Zaslav, and basically he comes in. He's like, Warner Brothers is hemorrhaging money. We need to plug all these holes as quickly as possible, which unfortunately impacts the creative efforts of stuff that nerds want to see, right? I'm not forgiving it. I think it's shitty, and I think it's an example in the light of us seeing rich people sort of jump through loopholes that the normal person doesn't understand or get access to, right? And it's dumb. Yeah. And part of me wants to think of it like in terms of video games, where if a game gets shut down or if a game gets released and gets tanked in terms of bad reviews, it may be a bad thing for the company that released it, but for people that work for that company if that company shuts down, like the developers that worked on the game are actually not screwed. They're like, you made a game. You have on your resume a game that was released, right? It's on your It's on your CV, and it can be a good thing for you in your career. And I don't know if like that translates to the movie industry. It's like you were in a movie that was never released and publicly never released, right? It's very open how not released your movie was going to be.
Like we know you were in it, but no one knows anything about that.
Like I think of the star, whose name unfortunately I don't know, and perhaps would have known had this movie been released, right?
Well, we would have talked about her, right? Yeah.
Exactly. I'm not saying it's the only meal ticket she could have had. I'm not saying she's just using it as a stepping stone to bigger and better things. Hopefully she is, because that's how, I don't know, careers work. But can she get work saying like, I made a movie, a big movie that never came out? Like I think of all the actors, the writers, producers that were on this film, that I wonder how much it'll affect their careers. And the only sort of solace that I kind of get from it is that everybody that worked on that movie probably is in the industry and knows other people, and they say, oh, I worked with this person. Right. They're awesome. Oh yeah, what'd you work with them on? Batgirl. That never came out, did it? It doesn't matter. They were awesome to work with, and you should work with them on this project, right? So, unfortunately, it has to rely on word of mouth, right? Instead of the merits of the movie itself.
Well, and I think the thing that beyond that, like is just this idea of, and we talked about this a lot in a completely different context of media that basically has been disappeared. Here we have both Batgirl, which was like they legally can't release it, right, because of the way this thing works. So they disappear. At least that's my understanding.
Right. They legally can never release it.
So it's just been disappeared down a hole. But it's not just that. And then we also look at the way HBO Max is having content being pulled, and we've had creatives who, I think the one I always think of is Infinity Train, because that was a show that did 2 seasons and then got picked up by HBO Max for seasons 3 and maybe 4. And those seasons were never done. There was never a home video release. There was never anywhere else to get it. So they're gone. There is no way to watch this. And I'm reminded of kind of how we've talked about Doctor Who and how like they literally destroyed film,
or even like taped over it, right?
Well, I thought they destroyed it, but either way, to make room in the vault, right? And so the idea that like creative work was just lost, but not for like a good reason, not because of no. I mean, I don't know if it was the good reason for losing work, like it accidentally was destroyed. No, this is literally someone just disappearing the shit down a hole.
Yeah.
Now, luckily, in these cases, I suspect that the media still exists, right? So someday we'll be able to hopefully recover it. Although you never know, right? HBO Max, you could imagine them being like, delete everything. Right, because we don't ever want to show that again, and then the only thing we have are the people that worked on it. Like, boy, oh boy, I hope the creator got a copy
or something. Yeah. No, it's interesting. I think, and I might be remembering this wrong, but I feel like animation was disproportionately affected by these decisions, or it was at least the one reported on the most of just animation getting pulled. If Warner Brothers Discovery is as hard up for cash as possible, like, if these have fan bases, like maybe the creators could rally and like I would not be surprised if maybe Warner Brothers Discovery would be willing to literally sell the creators their property back again, right? Like I wonder if they could, if especially given time and given money, if they're so eager to pull the stuff from Access that they wouldn't additionally be eager to maybe just flip it.
Well, but then I've also heard the suggestion that some of this is also so they don't have to pay royalties, so they don't have to pay like the whatever was due in a contract. So it's like, like the idea that the process of trying to sell it would probably involve them having to reconcile that. But if it disappears, which was not in the no one would contract that, like, what if you take it down? It's like, oh, well, we're not going to be paying royalties because there are none, because it's not airing. I don't know. I don't know. But again, it all just feels like this kind of this ugly greed is coming and clawing at things in a way that isn't, fun or healthy.
And whether it's it's monetary or just kind of taking stances on things, just kind of being bold in the face of opinion. Dungeons and Dragons, speaking of big names and companies, has, like you said, we hadn't really talked about it before, but what just kind of fit the theme here. What did they do recently that kind of pissed a bunch of people off?
Oh, right. Well, they during a shareholder meeting, they'd already commented, D&D is under monetized. And that was like I think a red flag of like, well, what do you mean by that? Like, what are you going to try to do? Because the last time this discussion came up, a lot of, bad, like from what I've heard from people that like, Hasbro adjacent from the late 2000s, this is where like all the bad ideas start to really percolate. Like, what if we, made people subscribe to an online service to play the game? Or what if we made them, like they had to buy, if you want to use the magic sword in the game, you have to pay, you have to microtransact it, of course, which is absurd. But that was the kind of things that were being floated.
We're getting dangerously close to NFTs there too.
Right. Well, give them a chance, right? But, and then just this, one of the things that had come out, they're doing this play test for the 1 D&D, which they don't want to call it 6th edition or anything because it's 1 D&D. Anyway, but part of it, they've announced, there was a rumor circulating, which is probably unfounded or who knows, that they wouldn't use the open game license. I'm not going to go on a tangent about that, but they finally responded, and what they said is, "Oh, we're going to use the open game license, but we're going to change it." And among the changes that they actually specifically called out, one of them was charging royalties to people that make products if you make over a certain amount of money. It's like, it's this kind of thing where, in the open game license, for those that don't know, was this legal conceit that was created in 2001 that, you know, that basically said, oh, you can use the D&D rules however you want. And I've commented on this before. It's a license to breathe, because you could already do that. You didn't need their permission. But now, not only are they giving you permission, but they want to then charge you for it. Which is what they tried to do in 2008 with the 4th edition. They said, if you want to use our rules, you have to pay us thousands of dollars.
Speaking to other companies that want to release books and stuff like that specifically?
No, if you want to make a thing for Dungeons & Dragons, back in 2008 was 4th edition, you literally had to pay them thousands of dollars just to get the permission to make a compatible product, which again gets to the whole... And sell it. Right, well... I mean, and sell it, yeah. In theory, you could try to put it on your website or whatever, but that was also technically not allowed. Now they're saying, oh, that'll be allowed, but if you want to if you make over like a certain amount per year, you have to report it to us. Like, you have to report your profits to us and stuff.
Really?
Yeah. And again, just using things that are not copyrighted. These are rules to a game, which they have no control over. But now they also say if you make over $750,000 a year, which they said, oh, it's only 20 companies, and like, boy, oh boy, can we start counting who they're talking about, Critical Role. They want royalties. And it's just like, it's this idea of, you know, like I said, it's like this, they want you to think they're doing you such a fucking favor.
Right.
So that you have to pay them more money for something that they can't control. Right. It's like me saying, Dan, you know, you're having such a great time recording a podcast because me, the guy who invented the idea of the podcast, you have to pay me royalties. Like, you can't, that's bullshit, man. My dude.
No, yeah, we pay, I don't know,
Mr. Podcast every year.
Mr. Podcast, who invented the two friends talking about subjects for approximately 30 minutes to an hour. You would pay that for that license to do that. Absolutely.
And that's what it feels like. You're like, oh, you want to do this thing that has, you know, driving a car. Well, I invented the concept of driving a car. So if you want to drive a car, you have to pay me royalties if you drive over 100 miles a day.
Well, I mean, it actually kind of makes sense not to like...
What? Just unbridled greed? Yeah, I know it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, right, Wizards of the Coast does contain the letters IRS. So if you need to report your earnings... It makes sense if you think about it that way.
And so it's just, again, it's, you know, of all the things that happened this year, it was like every month a constant reminder that there's someone so greedy that they would basically piss in everyone's mouth to spite their face. Wait, that metaphor got away from me, but yeah, like,
nope, that still works, honestly.
Just you know, just the sheer greed of, and also when you think of a company like Hasbro, like, oh, really, assholes, you don't make enough money. You're going to go, you know, and this is the same company that's been printing, you know, that has turned Magic the Gathering into a novelty card shop, which, don't get me wrong, that's fine, right? You're charging people to buy like special decorative cards, special print Transformer Magic cards. Like, that's fine. If people want to pay for that, I think that's great.
Yeah.
But that's because you're creating something that, you know, has pretty art and is interesting, and I can go take and play in this game. I know that's 2022. When I think back, the one thing that like I think of the most is how upset I've been about greedy people being greedy.
And often the way we combat the sadness of the things around us is to kind of find things
to watch Star Trek.
Well, it's to tickle our fancy and to go down rabbit holes. And I think when I was looking back, I think both you and I had two very specific, like, for lack of a better, like, obsessions or rabbit holes that we went down. And yes, one of them was Star Trek. You're always in that hole, so to speak. I went down that hole. Oh, man. And, but the other thing I think maybe we could talk about a little bit, but like, I feel like, even though I think is at least within the last year, but this year I think it really kind of kicked off, is that you really just decided to jump into the deep end of the Super Sentai pool.
Yeah, I mean, I think has it only been this year? I feel like it's been the last 2 years. I don't recall, you know, this is one of these things where just the way the world has been, you're like, I don't know, what was that? Yes, I've been watching a lot of Super Sentai and Power Rangers, although less enthused about those.
And started branching out this year with getting with Kamen Rider.
Yeah.
What is it about that, do you think, that kind of really you connected with, or that you that made you really want to dive into it even further? this year?
I don't know. I think I've had, because I'm trying to think back. I mean, I probably say it in the episode where I first talked about it, because I really started with me watching the original Zhu Ranger, Kyoryu Sentai Zhu Ranger. And I think I started watching it almost as like a lark, like as a joke. I was like, haha, let me see what this was like compared to the American show. And I actually enjoyed it. But there's something about like, it's a superhero TV show, right? It is like any comic book superhero type thing. It's what it is, right? And there's something very appealing about it, but also it's different enough. It's not the X-Men. It's not the Avengers. It is this weird shit from Japan whose sole purpose was to sell toys. And so there's something about it that was in how it was like, whereas, we talk about tropes in comic books and superhero stories, how like there's these common themes of whatever, right? Of groups.
Common themes?
Common themes. Common themes. God damn it.
Common themes.
There are common themes across these works, and the Sentai is a similar thing where every series has some common themes, but then they also have their own thing, right? Like there's the group of certain number of characters who they have some sort of superpower type thing. They switch into they change into fancy costumes. Henshin, they usually have big robots that fight.
Indeed.
But then each individual show approaches things differently, right? Has things like some are a little bit darker or a little bit brighter. Some are silly. And so I think there's something about just like having a common format. That is, man, every time I say common, you're going to laugh at this. But I think there's something about like, it's that familiarity. It's like the person that reads every Marvel and DC comic book, right? Where like the idea that like, don't you start to realize you're reading the same thing over and over? I mean, not the same thing, but like, how, when you squint, how far different are they, right? Like, how many, Iron Man-esque characters or Superman-esque characters can you read about till you're like, okay, I've read enough. Well, some people they like that, right? There's something comforting in knowing the framework that it's built on and then being able to appreciate deviations from that. So I think really that's what it was. And I don't know, I was never a big anime guy, but I realized like, this is like only like it's adjacent, right?
Yeah.
It really is
a little bit, yeah.
Except with live action, and probably costs a lot more because of all those explosions in quarries. And you know what? Shows filmed in quarries. I grew up watching Doctor Who. I just can't say no.
Right. For me, I drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak, and went down into the committed to Star Trek. Again, I think I might have started the Next Generation at the end of last year, but generally 2022 was like, you're ready to win it, because we got through Next Generation. We started DS9, but also Strange New Worlds.
And Lower Decks.
Started Lower Decks, watched 2 of the 4 Next Generation movies. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm committed. It's been a really interesting experience, and we've talked about this probably more than other topics in detail in previous episodes. But I think, especially speaking to what you're talking about before with just the things going on in the world that make you sad or mad, especially Next Generation, I think that show is going to stick with me for a long time because it was always nice to watch, to sit down with everything going on, from whether it's, I don't know, a committee reflecting on how a bunch of the population stormed the nation's capital, to
war in Eastern Europe.
Yeah, that too. To sit down and go to watch a show that is based in actual diplomacy, that doesn't sacrifice tension, drama, or even, like spectacle, but it always comes down to talking it out and actually kind of thinking through a problem. Mm-hmm. Which that's kind of the scary thing. If I reflect on it further, it's just like, why is that the escapist solution? Right?
And that's totally understandable. Like, I think about how I started watching West Wing in like 2003.
Yeah.
It was, I didn't like the state of government as I saw it, actually maybe 2004. So I started watching this make-believe government that I felt like there's something, where things were, instead of whatever we had in as president then, watching a stately intellectual handle things. There is something escapism to it, right? Like here, the idea of watching Star Trek, where everything is handled by rational discourse and talking.
And understanding, like actual like discourse in the sense that people are communicating. It's not just opinions being lobbied about. It's speaking and listening, right, and understanding. Maybe there's also a professional aspect of that too, considering it's basically what I teach. But
being a starship captain.
Yep.
I want to sign up for that class.
And slowly losing my hair, but but more than just like engaging in actual discourse and what the actual word means, right? Communication in order to accomplish something. It's just nice to see. Not to get too like real, but like in 2016, there was an election where it seemed like educated and thoughtful discourse lost the day. And I remember posting on to social media going like, well, I have to go into class tomorrow and tell everybody that everything that we're talking about here matters and is important. And man, for a while, and in some aspects through to today, it still seems like a struggle. But it's nice to see a show that's like, no, like we can probe problematic topics, problematic people, as well as new situations, unpredictable scenarios, and solve it with thoughtful discourse.
Right.
And it's pretty cool. That makes me happy. So, Star Trek, not only in terms of being awesome, it just kind of hit me real deep and made it a really important rabbit hole that I descended even deeper into this year.
Yeah, well, and I think, and you also watch Strange New Worlds, which I think also...
There's a fair bit more punching in that one, but it's still carrying the torch.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the era. And the idea that there's more of that to come, right? That we have...
Punching?
More... Probably, and talking. No, there's something... And I think, that, to see the many faces of Star Trek, both good and bad, that is almost like a whole, like I think I'm excited. Every time you talk about it, I'm always excited. Whenever you text me or watching an episode, I'm always like, ooh, I check to make sure I know which one you're talking about. And no matter how ridiculous the episode may be. But yeah, so I guess in contrast to my gloom and doom, there is something nice that we definitely we focus on a lot.
Lastly, I guess, is there one thing that you feel signifies 2022 for you, whether it's a movie, a TV show, game, and I guess nothing sad, I guess we were talking about.
I think I already told you what signified 2022. Yeah.
Is there, or I guess maybe like a standout, a surprise, whether new or old?
I would say that probably the one thing that, of all the things, and again, it's funny, so many things we talk about are just Disney shit.
Sure.
And it is kind of remarkable how much Disney dominates the conversation. But I will say that, of all the things, something I wasn't really thinking about until it came out, that actually really I thought was probably one of the hardest, heaviest hitting, heaviest punching media out there, was actually the Disney Plus series Andor.
Oh, yeah.
Not surprisingly, because it's from the creator of Rogue One, but it's one of the few times where something called Star Wars really, really felt like it was a real story about a war. Although in this case, not even a war, a revolution.
And not shying away from those themes and the implications of a war.
Right.
Of dealing directly with fascism and
in the price that people pay, or that they're willing to pay to kind of combat that fascism. And I probably because creeping fascism is a modern thing. Again, it is maybe it hit so hard because some of it really felt like, wow, okay, this is something that, maybe some people need to start thinking about.
Right.
And I'm not trying to be grim about it. That's just like this reality, is we have things that look grim. But yeah, just to have that show and to just in a way that it's it gave you this world, like, what if this future, if not future, I guess it's a long time ago, right? But this fantasy, it's a fantasy world, right? It's a fantasy world where there is an evil empire, and what people do to what it takes to combat that, what kind of people combat it, and how they do so, and the prices people pay. And it's not shiny, it's not pretty. It sucks a lot of the time, but at the end, I mean, not the show doesn't suck, but like, it's not like there's parts where you're like, wow, this is like, some of these people are like, they're not the best. Some of them are not the best people. You know, some people are just in it for reasons that aren't always the best. But you know, and I mean, it's one of those things where like, if you read it, you know enough about like the history of like with World War II and stuff like that, where you read about like the kind of people in France that were fighting fascists. And like, yeah, some of them were actually not good people. But that's kind of how these stories, the realities work. So
it's interesting because like it shows the danger of complacency, right? Of the people like, well, I was just doing what I was told to do, or I was just a citizen, you know, and saw atrocities happening to me. Like, it's not to me, but to other people. Like,
right.
It's interesting because it does what I'm not going to lean on the Latin phrase I always like to come back to, but it leans on what I argue good art is supposed to do, in that, or not supposed to, but can do, and what actually makes it an important part of society, where it's art can be escapist, art can be fun, art can be challenging, but it can also be a comment. It can allow us to engage with the stuff that's around us in a safe and multifaceted way, so that we can actually, going back to what we were saying before about discourse, understand different points of view and make more informed decisions about what the right step forward is. And we call that dulce et utile, because sweet and useful. All art should be sweet and useful. Thank you, Horace, the Roman poet. I had to say it.
I know.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. That's a fantastic one.
So yeah, that was, I think, thinking about 2022, that's the one thing that was kind of a surprise. Because I guess maybe I wasn't thinking about it, or I didn't know what to expect. I mean, I figured it'd be fun, but I didn't expect it to be like, it's going to be a gut punch.
Right.
To the point where there's episodes that are hard to watch. I mean, there's a very entirely believable representation of what, an imperial prison is.
Yeah.
You know, and what happens inside. And it's tough, and you watch it and you're like, shit. But at the same time, there are moments of hope that you're like, even a new hope, if you will.
Oh,
sorry, that's terrible. I mean, anyway, I'm not here to talk about Andor, because I don't think you finished it. So
I still have the final 3 episodes to watch.
Yeah, but anyway, so there you go.
For me, I don't think I have a whole lot to say about this, aside from just like, it was something I kept coming back to. There's something about the world it created, the vibe of it, the tone of it, I should say, and the gameplay of it as a video game, that even though I had kind of done everything I wanted to do in it, I kept going back and playing through certain levels. And that the game I want to talk about is Stray, the cat game.
The cat game.
It's one of the first one of the most recent science fiction worlds that just kind of completely grabbed my attention. I was so fascinated in like what happened, what is, I guess, science fiction, as it is science fiction, but more like dystopian, post-apocalyptic kind of things, where I'm like, what happened to this world to make it so bizarre and unique? But also kind of realizing, actually, through the conversation we had about it on this show, just it's a game about, despite you being a cat who can't talk, who never develops the ability to talk, because guess what? You're still just a cat. It's a game about communication. That's the read I kind of took from it. And how communication is more than just words on paper. It's more than just etiquette. It's interaction in terms of language and being an entity in front of another entity, and doing your best to kind of get the point across, even if you cannot literally communicate with each other. It was a fascinating game with wonderful sort of a visual aesthetic and incredible set pieces that, for me, really, I kind of tickling the sort of artistic side of my brain, there are lots of scenes, especially at the end, where I'm just like, wow, just to see what's happening happen in front of me. And I like that it wasn't, it was a small game that captured the interest of the internet for a hot minute, but it was more than just being about a game where you have a meow button, which you do.
Which is important.
Yeah, indeed. That trades on empathy and the choices you make, the puzzles that you solve, and the world that they create is all based on this weird kind of nostalgic, sad sympathy for this very strange and delicate society that the game takes place in, and it's just so cool. And despite kind of having a sad tone to it, it was actually one of the warmest and most welcoming experiences I had of the year. And I can see myself just kind of spinning it up every now and then for years to come, just to kind of play in it again and experience it.
Well, and that's, I think that's, there's something about a game that has like that kind of effect.
Yeah.
And I don't think necessarily just in various ways. There are games I think do things really well, even if it's just a feeling.
I'm not going to say it's a completely unique setting. I think the premise is interesting, and obviously playing as a cat is cool, but like it just presented all these pieces in a way that really kind of connected with me. I think the way I connected with Stray, I think is similar to, I think, why a lot of people might have connected to something like even Final Fantasy VII back when that first came out, because there was this weird dystopian society that was kind of all the pieces that they were showing in terms of background design.
I'm going to tune you out for a few minutes.
That's okay. Yeah, but like I think there's a lot of people that had never played a Japanese role playing game, and two, maybe hadn't really encountered dystopian fiction, and like, oh, it's kind of like, it kind of connected for them. For some of us, not so much, right? But it connected them on like an emotional level. It's like that defined what post-apocalyptic sci-fi looked like for them, right? Among other things, right? And we all probably have something that we can point to that is like that. This is kind of like, for some reason, everything kind of lines up and shares the same weird wavelength with you, and becomes a weird defining moment. And for me, definitely Stray was that. So, wow, we both kind of came up with nice, profound answers to wrap it up.
And great. something that was positive and uplifting, like society where all the people are dead or fighting fascists.
So if you, dear listeners, have any thoughts about the topics we discussed this week, feel free to leave your thoughts as comments on the page for this episode at forallintents.net.
You can also post your comments or engage in conversations with other listeners on, I guess, our Facebook page. Do we still do that? I don't know. I don't log into Facebook anymore, so so it's Dan's Facebook page at this point.
You can find us on various social media. I guess we might need to cut that out too.
We need to really rework this whole ending we've done, man.
Indeed. You can find us on other social media as well. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at DBethel. You can find me on Instagram at DBethel Comics. You can find Andrew on Mastodon at
Profound Dark at dice.camp.
There we go.
While you're on our website at forallintents.net, you can also take a look at our YouTube page, or you may already be there because we do, in fact, broadcast the episode to YouTube. So if you are there, feel free to like and subscribe, or as they like to say, ring the bell.
We use 2 tracks of music for our show. One is called Disco Medusi, the other is called District 4. Both written and performed by Kevin MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod, immortal swordsman, graph paper enthusiast, and musician extraordinaire.
You can find his music at incompetech.filmmusic.io, and that's all licensed under the Creative Commons 4.0 attribution license.
If you like the show and like to help us out, the best way to do so would be to subscribe to the show using whichever podcasting service you happen to use. What would help us out even more, though, would be to leave some sort of review, whether a text review or using their proprietary metric will help spread the word to new potential listeners through the magic of algorithms. Well, Andrew, actually, I have one final category here that we forgot. I forgot to bring up when we were talking about 2022.
You're going to say something cheesy like the best friends category or something, aren't you?
No, that's ridiculous.
I could see where this is going. I could see it.
Best, I don't know where you get that from. 2022's best podcasting partner. Kyron Silva is always great. Keep it on the feed, dear listeners. I don't know if we're going to come back with an episode next week, but a new con artist is on the way. So whether that's next week or the week after, we're coming back with another one of those, and it's really fun to talk to Kyron again. So Kyron, congratulations, 2022's best podcasting partner, because Andrew's a jerk and predicted by category. Just kidding, Andrew. You're the best. Happy 2022. Happy New Year. Let's just say that. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
There we go.
Happy New Year to you too, D. Bethel.
So until you have a Happy New Year, I'm D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And for all intents and purposes,
that was a podcast.
That's a wrap. That's a wrap. My name is Dan Bethel, and I'm here to say
you like Fruity Pebbles
in a major way. Yeah, that's Let's stop recording. For me,
actually, can you pause real quick?
Yeah,
I really have to pee.
Go tankle.
What happens when you drink a lot of water?
Go tankle.